Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's my honor to start today's town hall meeting by welcoming you all to the 2013 State Employees Charitable Campaign. And this is a very special year for the campaign, and Dr. Callender asked me to chair it because I did it once before, and I did such a good job. He said, time for you to do that again. And so I'm here to do it again, and whenever Dr. Callender asks me to do something, I always try to think of a way that what he's asked me to do can be really special. And as it turns out, this is really special because this year's campaign represents the 20th anniversary of UTMB participation in SECC. And that means literally over the last 20 years, UTMB employees, through their generosity, their compassion, and yes, even a sense of duty, have raised millions of dollars for people who need our help. And this year, our goal for the campaign is $500,000, but I hope in celebration of these 20 years, we will even exceed that goal because it's time to really look at how much people still need our help and how much we have the opportunity to help them. And also when you consider there are about 11,000 of us here and only about 21% of us actually contribute to this campaign. And what if 31% contributed or 41% contributed? Think of how wonderful that could be. So this year, I hope that we'll increase our participation and exceed our goal. And I'm asking each of you, when you go back, be sure to ask 5 employees to join you in the campaign and ask them to ask 5. And that should help us in increasing our participation. And for our kickoff today, if you look out in the foyer, we have a number of people who came, even in this awful weather, to let us know about their agency and what they do. And so all of you can simply go on our UTMB home site, and number 2 will come up as SECC, or you can just do Google UTMB, and you'll get to the website, and it'll show you how you can contribute, how you can go through the process of making a pledge, and it will list all the charitable agencies that are part of this campaign. So I ask all of you, once again, please join me and the wonderful people, the wonderful employees who really make this campaign possible. I have the honor of being the chair, but I work with a wonderful committee made up of dedicated UTMB employees and people like Becky Trout and Pep Valdez and many other people who are on that committee who make this campaign possible. So once again, let's show the world how great UTMB is in terms of generosity. Help me make this campaign great and exceed that goal. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Watson. That was wonderful. I think I'll just let you do the rest of the slides. That was marvelous. Ms. Sollenberger reminded me that the last time I had a town hall, it rained then too. So obviously my rain dance is working. So anyway, I apologize for the weather. Thank you for braving it and showing up here today. If you're joining us through an online means or by a video, thank you very much for your attention today. I've been asked a lot over the past few months about where UTMB is headed. I think most people understand that we have a pretty detailed set of plans that describe what we're supposed to do as an institution. In general, they describe pretty much a role for everybody here as we apply our skills, our experiences to the institution's mission and support work. But still there's concern about whether or not we're really planning appropriately for what's ahead, and can we achieve success in the next 5 years. So I thought I'd spend the bulk of today talking about that, tell you how as a senior leadership group we're thinking about the future, what the inputs are that describe for us what we think the external environment's going to be, and how we're changing our plans or building our plans to be prepared for that future. So we'll get into that in just a moment. I want to talk at first, though, about the UCount results. We did the survey back in the April-May timeframe. We actually got the early results in late July, 1st of August. And again, I'll speak more about those in just a moment. I do want to spend one slide's time talking about this environment in which we operate and about all that's being written about it now and what's being written that everybody thinks reasonably describes the future for places like UTMB, because it's that sort of understanding that frames our planning process. And we'll talk briefly about the road ahead, about where we are now. It's been 5 years since we first created the road ahead document. So talk a little bit about that. And then I want to spend the bulk of the time talking about priorities, particularly those that help us prepare for that future. So let me get started. UCount survey. So we got the results back, and they're really not much different from what we saw a couple of years ago. And, that's really not that much of a surprise. In retrospect, the action planning process that we used perhaps wasn't or isn't the best for our institution. And one of the things that we saw immediately is of the 900 plus action plans that were created, according to our consultants' recommendations. This is a process that's used in a lot of places like UTMB, this action planning approach, very detailed, very much focused on engaging people and addressing issues and concerns for employees. When we started that process, I heard a lot from people that we don't like this very much. It's really intense. We have a lot of other things we're trying to do. We feel like we're overcommitting time. And also the way this is organized, we feel like it pits supervisors, frontline managers against employees. Well, that's clearly not what we wanted, but we didn't really have an alternative. So we, if you will, prosecuted that agenda with all those action plans. Of the over 900, only 95 were ever reported as completed. So that tells us a lot. Now, more may have been completed. Maybe they just weren't closed out. But that tells us a lot about that approach and that process, and perhaps is the significant reason that we didn't change much. Now, some things improved. For example, more people, a significant number, said this time that they're proud that they work at UTMB. There also were some very positive comments about trust within the local work units. But we started thinking about, okay, well, how do we best respond to this? Should we follow that same process again? Overwhelmingly, in a very short period of time, we decided no. We don't want to do that. We understand everybody here is working very hard. That's the nature of working at an academic health science center these days. Everybody's being pushed to use the full limit of their skills and their available time to accomplish work. We don't want to add to that burden with the process. So we spent the last couple of months thinking about that. And what we want to do as we go forward is to try to focus our efforts. We see some themes across the institution. Some are listed on this slide. Communication is still an issue. We heard loud and clear that communication between different levels of UTMB, bottom to top, if you will, don't function as well as they should. We don't feel like the communications are getting to us as employees. We want to know more. We want to understand better what we bring to UTMB, how what we do really impacts UTMB today and into the future. We also believe that some of that is that people believe that across the mission areas and support areas, we don't communicate as well as we should either. We're not working together as effectively as we should, and that's related to the way that we approach communication. Now, almost everybody recognizes that communication is a huge challenge in a place like this. We're a complicated organization. We're geographically distributed. There are a lot of things occurring all the time. We have a lot of work teams. A single individual may be involved in as many as 20 different work teams on 20 or more different projects. And so it just enhances that communications challenge. That said, there are ways that large organizations like ours have successfully approached the communications challenge. So that's one area of focus we think is appropriate. What we're doing, because the feedback is slightly different in the health system and in CMC versus the rest of the health system, in the academic enterprise, in the institutional support areas. So what we're going to do over the next few weeks is have the senior leaders, the vice presidents, associate vice presidents, in each of the major mission and support areas get together. They have the results already. They've been looking at them. I've already met with the institutional support group. We did that earlier this week. Talked about some of these approaches, talked about priorities, the way we might move forward. We're going to get back together, talk about this some more, and come up with an approach for the institutional support areas that's very focused on no more than 3 priorities that cut across the institutional support areas. So we're thinking about how we do that. I know Ms. Sallenberger is planning that for the health system. They're probably going to have 3 major work groups, perhaps 1 more. Dr. Jacobs is planning on this for the academic enterprise. So we're going to try to customize our approach, make it more specific, and not take too much time. Hit the high points, create some success there, and then we can figure out how we want to move on to the next level of concerns or issues as we go forward. No perfect solution. We're in the middle of the pack now when you look at places like UTMB in terms of employee engagement. Employee engagement is estimated based on certain points of feedback within a survey like we all did. And we think it's in our best interest to improve employee engagement. So in essence, to me, that means our employees really do understand what they're supposed to do here, how they're supposed to do it, and how they contribute to the success of the organization. So that will be our focus as we go forward. The leaders who don't already have the survey feedback will get that on November 6th, which is next Wednesday. And then we'll release all of the results to the entire institution on November 20th, I believe, somewhere just before Thanksgiving. That will give our leaders time to meet, get together, think about approaches, be able to explain some of the feedback to employees when they receive it, and then we'll all work together to plot our course forward. So now I have been accused of not wanting to release the survey results because they're bad. That's not true. I don't think they're necessarily bad. They're just not as good as we want them to be. Again, our principal focus is on how do we address these things in a reasonable way without taking an inordinate amount of time, but achieve our goal of trying to enhance or improve employee engagement at UTMB. So we're going to try to do that. Please engage. You're a leadership group, and so please help us figure out how to accomplish our goals as we move forward. All right. So let's move on and talk about our destination, where we're going, and the things that we think we need to do to be successful in getting to our destination. Now, this is information that I borrowed from PricewaterhouseCoopers. They have it displayed slightly differently on their website. This is the sort of information that the senior leaders of our institution review on a regular basis. We have a lot of intelligence posts, if you will, out there that we monitor. People who provide analyses about what's happening at academic medical centers, what's happening with regard to research, clinical care, education work, even the support areas. And so we're constantly scanning that information. Our planning process accommodates that. At least once a year, we stop as a group and look at the information that's available, look at our current assessment of the operating environment, our projections for the future, and make sure that we're in sync with what's being written about academic health science centers. Ms. Sallenberger and I both sort of found this particular piece independently. We've been using it in conversations with some of UTMB's leaders. Now, what this particular piece is focused on is mostly the clinical enterprise, what's changing about the way that we'll deliver care, the things that are changing in the marketplace, the things that are changing with regard to patients, ideas that help them or drive them to select certain groups of providers. I just want to go through this slide. Even though it's fairly specific, I think we can generalize some of these messages, and it will help everybody understand how we use this sort of information, why it's important in terms of planning a course for the future. So we look up at number 1, the build the brand by holding faculty accountable for cost and quality. Well, essentially, physicians and nurse providers, all of us who are engaged in delivering hands-on health care, for the longest time, really have been focused on that immediate interaction with that patient. That's what we were trained to do. Patients' needs always come first. That's not changing. But the sorts of care that we deliver these days is a little bit more complex than it used to be. Also, we're thinking differently. We're not thinking so much about a single episode of care, a single, if you will, transaction between an individual provider and patient. We're thinking about the sequence of events that's necessary to restore a patient to a better state of health. Now, we see patients in all different sorts of situations. They've been injured, they have a standing chronic disease, their function's deteriorated for some reason, their tolerance to medication has changed, and a lot of times it's many combinations of different things that cause a patient to come see us. Well, we need to understand that we function in a system, and we need to think about the full range of events that occur in restoring that patient to a better state of health. That means we need to understand our responsibility at a single point in time, over the course of time, and critically, how we relate to what's happening with other providers. What's our role? We're accountable for certain things in that process of care. We need to understand the responsibility and accountability. We also need to focus on making this as efficient for the patient and for us as we can. Again, holding the patient's needs is the highest priority. So that's what this is really about, trying to encourage us to think more broadly, understand our responsibility and accountability. We, as a group of UTMB's leaders, think that's very important. And a lot of the things that we're doing are focused on increasing our understanding of what these complex episodes of care really look like and how we make them most effective for the patient and for us, how we better understand our individual responsibility and hers that serves that system of care as a whole. Become a part of a larger community network. How many of you are monitoring what's happening with the exchanges that have come to us as a consequence of the Affordable Care Act? I see a few hands. I have to believe most of you are. You're just shy about raising your hand. Of course, a lot is being written about the failures in the government's existing website that offers people access to the federally run exchanges. I think a lot of people aren't surprised by that. Things are coming along. Hopefully those things are going to improve over the course of time. But as we think about patients' engagement in making a selection of providers, choosing insurance plans, we think that's going to occur differently in the future. And the exchanges now are just the most current example of some of the changes that are coming along. Patients will likely have more personal responsibility for choosing a health care insurer, a payer. If the law holds up as it's currently written, we all have that personal responsibility. We're supposed to have some sort of health insurance. But the range of plans that are available is going to be pretty wide. And the amount that a patient will have to pay out of pocket will depend on the plan. Well, what's one of the consequences of that? Patients become much more price sensitive to their choices because they're paying more out of pocket. One extension of that is many employers are considering whether they go from what's called a defined benefit plan, where the employer offers a health plan or a set of health plans that have defined benefits, to a defined contribution, where an employer just gives an employee an amount of money and says, go out to the exchange and choose a plan. So a lot of things happening that we believe will make patients more price sensitive. Well, are academic health centers high-cost providers or low-cost providers? In general, high-cost providers. And there's a good reason for that. Of course, we have this, some people call overhead of education and research that we need to support. We know neither of those functions pays for itself, and there's not enough external support coming to pay for the way we do those today. So academic health centers generate patient care revenue that helps offset that cost of their education and research missions. We also know, because we deliver soup to nuts in terms of care, everything from very basic primary care to very advanced forms of specialty care, particularly for very ill patients, that our costs are higher. They're different from what a community level provider offers to a patient. why would a patient or a group of patients in the future, when they're more price sensitive and going to have to pay more out of pocket, choose an academic health science center as part of their provider choice? If the providers are linked to the payers, why would they choose UTMB? Many of them may not. We need to be more competitive on a price basis. Now, can we ever equal what's available from a community level provider? No, but we provide a broader array of services. So as you begin to think about this, you can understand how complex these market forces are and start thinking about where UTMB needs to position itself if it's going to preserve its ability to appropriately educate healthcare professionals for the future and do research that's impactful and makes a difference in diagnosis, treatment, and prevention. Well, one of the ways we do that, a couple of things are mentioned on this slide that will help make us more attractive. Number one, have more affiliations. Be connected in a network of providers, including community-level providers. Be able to offer that very advanced sort of care, be able to offer primary care, and be able to allow patients to move between different sorts of providers. So being part of a larger community network is very much on our minds. And many of our plans that are underway, in fact, many of our current business transactions, are focused on becoming part of larger networks. Push the envelope on new kinds of care extenders to increase effectiveness. Again, this is very clinically focused. This is most specifically thinking about how we use our healthcare professionals practicing at what some people describe as the extent of their license, so we use our people most effectively. Simple example of this is, why should a physician be engaged in seeing a patient who presents with acute onset of back pain, particularly if we know something about that patient to begin with? Truth is that many places around the country now, when a patient calls in with acute back pain, don't have that patient see a physician. About 85+% of patients who present with acute back pain benefit from physical therapy, and that takes care of their issue. Why do we force the patient to wait for a physician, particularly if physician resources are limited? So can we use nurse practitioners? Can we use physical therapists? Can we use our people in more efficient and effective ways based on what we already know about patients and outcomes of intervention? Now, of course, this is, again, a very complicated area, and when you say things like that to some of your physician colleagues, they shout, "Heresy, how can you possibly think that? You're going to kill people." There's all sorts of impressions. But again, these are the sorts of things that we need to think about to make care efficient. We know Texas doesn't have enough doctors today. We can't recruit enough doctors to fully serve all the patients that want to come to UTMB. So how do we use our health professionals most effectively as we move forward? And you can extend that to how do we use the skill sets of the people we have at UTMB most effectively as we go into the future. I think we do that pretty well today, but we have to make sure we don't kill our people in the process. I mean, how many of you feel like, gosh, I just can't see the end of this? There's so much going on. A lot of us do. Some days are just absolutely crazy. You go to sleep worrying about what happened, and you wake up the next morning worrying about what happened and what happens the next day. So again, thinking about how we use skill sets, how we preserve the ability of our people to focus, get them appropriately focused, get their efforts prioritized, and help move the institution forward in the most efficient way. Interesting one, number 4. Become an information hub to realize a return on health information technology investment. Well, what does that mean? Well, it could mean a lot of different things. Those who are involved in research are thinking about what our Epic electronic health record is already generating in terms of an information trove, or as an information trove that can be mined to help us look more closely at what we're doing with patients, what their outcomes are, and hopefully improving the clinical effectiveness of our practices over the course of time. So perhaps we can extend those sorts of services beyond UTMB. That could even be a revenue stream. Some places are already considering that. Probably more importantly for us is that we think about how we leverage technology to the fullest extent, not only for the benefit of our patients, but for the benefit of our education and research mission. So a lot of work going on already, a lot of things in our plans related to leveraging information technology investments. Finally, I hear this constantly from a lot of different sources beyond PwC, align clinical excellence with research excellence. Leverage the resources you have. Think about the clinical impact of the research. It makes sense from a resource utilization standpoint, and probably it's also important when patients make that critical set of selections we talked about earlier. Another reason to choose an academic health center as a provider is because we have a broader range of options. And when we have very active clinical research, our translational research expertise, even basic research expertise, patients know that we have a very broad range of options and expertise that we can offer to them that's not available in places that aren't academically inclined. So very important that we think about, well, what does that alignment really look like? How do we do that most effectively? Clearly could be carried too far, and then we'd restrict our ability to innovate, to move forward. But if we don't do it, then we're likely going to be inefficient. We can't afford to do the things we want to do in the future. So what's the right balance? Where does UTMB need to be? And again, our planning process is trying to take this into account, charting a course for us that will change as more information develops about the levels of research funding, priorities coming from the national research granting agencies, philanthropic sources, and the like. So the idea of this slide is that there's a lot behind our plans. There's plenty written about the future in healthcare, the future for academic health science centers, what it will take to be successful. Of course, the key for us is to assimilate all that information and decide what's right for UTMB. And right now, we think our plans are helping us do that. We want everybody to understand that and be involved in the process of looking at this information and thinking about what it means for UTMB's future. All right, so I mentioned the Road Ahead document. This is actually the 5th year now that we've had our plans for the future described this way. The Road Ahead, as you know, is intended to be an outline of our institutional strategic plans. It's not all-inclusive, but in fact, I have heard it's too general. I don't understand what it really means. It really is designed to help people understand inside and outside the institution what's going on here, what are areas of focus, what do we need to do to be successful now and into the future. I still think it does a pretty good job of that. When you look at the associated scorecard that lays out more specifically task, timelines, responsibility, and outcome measures, it's now pretty big. It's pretty long. It's comprehensive. And a number of people told me it's scary because there's a lot on there. There's a lot to do, and there's concern that we can't get all of these things done. Well, the bottom line is we actually have been getting all those things done. People look, and I encourage you, if you have time, and you're so inclined, go back and look at previous scorecards. If you have not much time, look at the red, blue, yellow, and green. It's almost all green. We've been able to accomplish our goals. And I believe because of that, we've moved our institution significantly ahead. I have to say, one of the things that's most gratifying to me, and it's attributable to everybody at UTMB, when I travel around the country now and I introduce myself, people find out that I'm from UTMB, almost invariably I'm complimented on what our institution has done and what it's doing. We're back in the national spotlight. People know that great things are happening here, and they're pleased to see it in many cases. And oftentimes I'm asked, the company in question, How did you do that? How are you generating this success? What's going on there? Well, it's because of our people, clearly. I think we have good plans. Now, they're comprehensive, they're big, they're bold, there's a lot to them, but I think they're important, and we haven't really exhausted our ability to accomplish our plans. We do have to make sure that we have the right plans going forward. And again, that's what our planning process is designed to do. So our overall course is charted by the strategic plan. The academic enterprise, the health system, and the institutional support areas have their own accompanying plan that rolls up to that plan, and then it cascades into the institution. But coming back to the point, the criticism, if you will, I don't understand how I fit into that. I really understand how this plan relates to the future. I'm worried that we're not going to be ready. I can't distinguish when I look at the things in the road ahead what's important now versus what's important in the future. So again, I wanted to spend today talking about the aspects of the plan that are important for the future. We've kind of kidded around about this and said, you know, what if we divided our plans into those that concern running the business versus those that involve changing the business? The great bulk of what's in the road ahead is actually concerned with running the business. What we have to do on a day in and day out basis to make sure our patients receive great care, our students get best possible educational experience that we can deliver, and that our research is impactful, that our institutional support areas provide the appropriate support for each of those missions. We can't be successful unless that happens. But clearly it's also important that we have an eye, or our eyes on the future. We have plans to get us to the right place in 5 years. So what I've done with a lot of input from Dr. Jacobs, Ms. Sollenberger, and other leaders is to say, okay, well, if we focus on changing the business, what are the priorities? What are the elements of our plans that are associated with that future? So again, that's what I want to talk about today. Let me go into some of those. All right. Well, this is no surprise. As I mentioned earlier, our success is directly related to the work of our people, the incredible pool of talent that we have today. Clearly, as we go forward, we need to continue to attract great talent, and of course that means we also have to retain the great talent we have. So our first focus is always going to be on our people and on attracting additional great people to UTMB. But how do we, coming back to some of the feedback from the employee survey, help our employees understand how they contribute to success? What if they're mostly involved in running the business? Do they understand that, how important that is to everyday success here? What if they're involved in the changing the business stuff, but they don't see the tangible results? How do we communicate to each of our employees what their role is, how important they are in accomplishing the road ahead goals? Well, one of the concepts that we've considered is, what if we could develop the My Road Ahead approach? This is a concept, not quite yet to document form, but what if, as we go forward, we have the road ahead, but we take this down to the individual level? So a manager, supervisor, when they do a performance evaluation every year, don't focus so much on things that went wrong or things that went right, but more on what are your responsibilities? What do you do for this unit, this part of the enterprise, for the institution? Here are your primary tasks. Here's what you do day in and day out, or here's what you're going to do for the next year that's critical to the institution's success. And along with that, what's the plan for your development? Many of our employees want more opportunities for development, skills development, leadership development, but it varies by unit. We're rolling out a lot of different development plans, training opportunities, and the like, and I'm going to address that more in just a moment. We have to make sure that they match our employees' needs. Best way to do that, we think, is at the local level. So what we want to do as we go forward is try to get around more regularly. And, you know, I'm at fault here. I haven't done enough to get around to individuals and individual groups to help people understand how they contribute. And I'm committed to do that better as I go forward, and so are the senior leaders of the institution. But really, it's about equipping our managers and our supervisors to have those conversations and focus them correctly. So we've got a lot of plans associated with doing that. Also, focusing on compensation. You know, the internet is a great tool. It's wonderful, so much information is out there, but it also can be very misleading. And a lot of our people look at internet information, look at local information, or don't have good local information about their compensation, and they worry about that. So we want to focus on that too. What do you get paid? What you get paid? And how do you advance that as you go forward? So we think all of these things are part of that response, better response to the needs and concerns of our employees. So that's a big focus of our plans. We think if we do that, in the next 5 years, we'll be the best place to work among all the academic health science centers and among big organizations in the country. All right, service. Remember the PwC slide that talked about holding us accountable for quality and service and cost? A lot of focus on service. A lot of people get some feedback about service, but it's not really actionable. Well, what do I do with this? Is it specific to me? What do my customers want? Whether they're patients, I know some people are offended by patients as customers, so I apologize for that. But customers come in all forms at UTMB. Students are customers. Colleagues are customers. People outside the institution are customers. Non-patients. And so, what does really great customer service look like? What does high-quality service look like? We're judged more and more on a day-in and day-out basis on the quality of our service. So we need to have strong targets. We already have those in the health system. The health system's doing great work. Dr. Kirschbaum, others within the health system, helping us identify appropriate targets. Those are things that we already have to do related to payer functions, the Affordable Care Act and the like. So we want to set appropriate targets, hit those, and then make sure we're in the top tier of performance. Great example of this, the work on sepsis-related mortality. We were sort of in the middle of the pack for the academic health science centers in the country. There are benchmarks, if you will. We had a mortality rate of about a third of patients who came in with sepsis, who were admitted with sepsis, who actually died of their disease. Now, that's a very serious form of illness. Typically leads to multiple organ failure, prolonged hospitalization. You can understand why the mortality rate would be high. Our performance was more or less in the middle of the pack, but a lot of our leading clinical thinkers got together and said, we think we can have this. We should be able to design new approaches, processes, improve existing processes, so we cut our mortality in half. They did it. It put us in the top 10% of academic health sciences in the country for sepsis-related mortality. Those are the sorts of things that we're already doing that put us in the right place. We're in the right place with many of those things now, and we need to be in the right place with additional ones in the future, and our plans allow us to do that. We know how important patient satisfaction data is, but for many of our providers, it's not as actionable as it needs to be. So making it more specific, thinking about what sorts of information help us change our practice and approach, all of those things are going to be important to us, and again, our plans accommodate those. Critical processes and create new ones. I mentioned the sepsis-related mortality. Innovation. Supporting innovation is key as we go forward. Great places innovate regularly. Our plans, we hope, will allow us to do that. Ensure confidentiality for all patients, including employees. I put this in because there's still a concern among some members of the UTMB family about whether or not they should seek health care here because they're concerned about confidentiality. We have invested heavily in systems that help maintain confidentiality, particularly in the electronic health care record. What happens, though, we're all well-meaning, we're motivated by concern for our colleagues, and we just want to do something to help, and in the process we may violate that patient's confidentiality. So there's a qualitative side to this involving how we communicate with each other and maintain confidentiality, We need to do that for our own family, and in the process, we take care of the confidentiality and become best practice or develop best practice over the course of time. So we're committed to do that. And finally, respond to customer service data all across the institution. In the institutional support areas, we have a major project underway this fiscal year to develop a way to measure actionable customer service feedback and then develop action plans in response. So very important for us. Our customers are our colleagues. How do we know that we're delivering what they need, what they want? We have a way to assess that and make sure then that we're meeting their needs. Strategies, a lot of things underway. We're all talking about population health, what that looks like, how we'll be approached by payers and other provider groups in the future to deliver health care in a way that promotes the greater health of a population of patients. Populations may be defined in many ways, a lot of discussions about that. We're now in the process of developing detailed plans for how UTMB will deliver a slate of population health-focused products. Very important that everybody understand that we're moving forward. Along with that, we have an opportunity to contribute more to the development of health policy. We have great people in medical humanities, in the preventive medicine community health department, in internal medicine, all across the institution who have much to bring to the health policy debates and discussions that are occurring around the country. We need to do that more. We need to support that more effectively. Dr. Jacobs has that as part of our academic plan moving forward. Invest in research to ensure faculty success and funding. We all know, a difficult time if you're involved in basic translational lab-based research, other forms of research. Funding per unit of research service is just not what it used to be and not likely to return to previous levels, at least in the next several years. But great things are happening. Our departments are reorganizing their efforts to support the faculty. Our faculty remain very competitive. We're thinking about how we reorganize our core support areas, how we put even more money aside for bridge funding to support innovation in research, how we think about how we best use research space, and also how we work through this issue of commitments to faculty. There are a number of commitments that have existed for a number of years, and they really haven't been well accounted for. So it's put us in a bit of a bind, but Dr. Jacobs is now ready to roll out a process to work through those with faculty engagement, address that issue once and for all, and manage it in a very transparent way as we move forward. Prioritizing investments in clinical service areas. Well, we're doing well clinically, but we know that we just don't have enough people and enough time to do things across the full slate of clinical operations. So what we're trying to do, and our plans account for this, is to look at market opportunities and look at current excellence and abilities and match those two to the extent we can. Focus on specific service lines and optimize functions across those service lines. So the first three that we've chosen are bone and joint disease, gastroenterology, heart, thoracic, and vascular disease. And again, based on market opportunities and current expertise. We have a number of others on deck. We also have some smaller services like ophthalmology, dermatology, ear, nose, and throat otolaryngology, which are a little bit more confined, and we're doing things to help them optimize their approaches to service delivery. So again, our plans are consistent with what we see for the future, the needs for the future. Alignment of clinical and research excellence, I talked about the basis for that earlier. There's some marvelous work underway across the research enterprise to help us do this more effectively. Kudos to Dr. Randy Urban and our faculty in internal medicine who have spent a lot of time thinking about this and have some marvelous plans for the future to help us pull together clinical and research excellence. Become the preferred provider for primary and specialty care. A lot of detail behind this. What does that really mean? What are patients looking for? Again, what are those market circumstances in the future? And how do they guide us today relative to what we need to do today to meet those needs and expectations for the future? And finally, align our student enrollment plans with resources and needs. I've talked many times about the huge need in Texas for a greater number of health professionals. UTMB has responded extraordinarily well. Our faculty and deans have done amazing work to increase our enrollments, to broaden our offerings to students. But at some point, there's only so much resource to go around. What makes sense for us in the future in the face of this need? How do we modify our approach to education to best meet the need in our state? A lot of our plans call on us to do that and allow us to do that in the years ahead. Just a couple of slides here to close out the priorities. Business strength. We all know that business planning is so important, being able to understand what we're doing, analyze what we're doing, think through what we're doing, understand the results, how we improve those. In some cases, if we're not achieving the results that we should achieve, and what that means in terms of the program. Should we let it go? Should we significantly modify it? How should we manage it as we go forward? So a lot of our plans called for enhanced decision-making tools to support those sorts of decisions. Coming back to that slide about greater partnerships, becoming a part of larger networks. What are the sorts of affiliations that we need in the future on the clinical side? What about the research side? A lot of thinking and analysis needs to go into those sorts of decisions, also to drive innovation, new approaches. So our plans call for those sorts of things as we move forward, enable that sort of action. The other thing that I've heard a lot about is, well, what about all the institutional support areas? Are we spending too much money? Are we getting the levels of service that we need? We've done some work here to look at that. It looks like we're sort of middle of the pack relative to the level of resources that we're spending, and a little bit higher than that relative to the levels of service. But we want to confirm that. We want to create essentially contracts between the institutional support areas and the rest of the institution that talk about levels of resource required to deliver certain levels of service and make sure everybody understands what's involved so that we don't underspend or overspend in terms of supporting our mission areas. Finally, improving infrastructure. As you know, a great deal of work going on with facilities, with core support functions and the like to make sure that we have the best possible support for our mission area work in the future. Financial success, well, it's that old thing, no margin, no mission. We have to make sure that our appetites don't carry us beyond our abilities. That's why we spend so much time with business planning. Some faculty have asked me, why are you making us jump through all these hoops? Can't you see we need to be entrepreneurial? We can't constantly focus on what it costs to do this and return on investment. Well, we have to do that. It is part of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, except on a small scale, typically involves a lot of thought about business plans, business analysis, return on investment. Successful entrepreneurs spend a lot of time doing those things. We're no different. We need to understand what it takes to be financially successful and invest appropriately. So anyway, those are the 5 major priorities that I see. If we continue to invest in those, if we continue to plan to meet those needs, a lot of detail that I didn't discuss today behind those areas, behind those plans, I think we can achieve our destination, which is to be the finest academic medical center in the country. I think we're on that path now. Again, we're being recognized more and more for the work we're doing. Our faculty are recognized every day for their work in education, research, and patient care. And even though we'll never be the largest, we may not be the most well-known, we can still be the best. I think that's what our people here want. That's always been the desire at UTMB, and I think that's what we should plan to do. So that's where we are. Now, when I was talking with people about this particular discussion, about talking about priorities, I got some pretty significant feedback that these things are important. People do want to understand where the institution is headed and what we think we need to be successful. But don't lose sight of that important feedback. It's all about the one. It's really about everybody here understanding how they contribute to the institution's success both now and in the future. I talked about that a lot earlier with communication efforts and the like. Please help me do that. Please help me understand what questions and concerns people have. Please help me explain that everybody contributes around here And you may be involved in running the business, you may be involved in changing the business, or a little bit of both, but you are absolutely critical as an individual to our success. So we're going to try to spread that message, talk to individual employees about our plans and their role in those plans as we go forward. Just close with the logo. It still means a lot to me. I don't know if you guys remember, but when we were thinking about this, remember what the red connotes? It's a target, okay? It's that orange-red for UTMB for a reason. It's a target, a focus on the future. The small case UTMB is because smaller case is less imposing. It's more approachable. It's UTMB and not University of Texas Medical Branch because it's easy to remember. It's easy to think about UTMB as a place, a destination, and not some overwhelming conglomeration when it's phrased this way. Importantly, it also is placed to the right in that logo, and it's slanted to the right. Again, indicating that we're moving forward. We're focused on the future. We intend to be leaders. Finally, working together to work wonders. Again, focused on the one, but bringing all the ones together in an amazing and incredible way to do marvelous things for patients, for students, for people around the world who want improvements, to see improvements in health and healthcare over the course of time. I really believe our plans are allowing us to do that. I hope you do too. If you don't, I'd love to talk to you more about it. I think we have important priorities established for the future. I think we have important plans established for every day around here, and now we just need to help each other accomplish our goals, execute those plans, and we'll be in good stead for a long time. So that's the message I wanted to deliver today. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope you agree. If you don't, I'd again like to hear more about it. And we certainly are constantly thinking about our plans, adjusting them, so we think UTMB is best positioned for the future. We're probably close to out of time now. I talked a lot today, I know that, and I apologize, but I thought it was important to really dive into our approach to the future. For those of you who have questions, please come on down. I'll wait around here until I answer every question today. We've had a few submitted online, and we'll get written responses out to those. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for everything that you do for UTMB. Have a great day.